My husband saw a college party video of me making out with two guys 10 years ago. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I'd like to ask for a quick favor. We've noticed the channel's been losing a bit of traction, and your subscription can make all the difference. It's quick, free, and really helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world to us. Let's grow this channel together. Thank you so much. Now let's get into the video. I'm Rebecca. I'm 29, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had everything figured out. My husband, Pierce, just served me divorce papers, and honestly, I still can't believe this is happening to me. Like, we're talking about a man who used to tell me I was the best thing that ever happened to him, and now he won't even look at me. But let me start from the beginning, because this whole thing is just insane. So, Pierce and I had been together for 8 years total, married for 5. He works in the medical field making really good money, and I do computer stuff, which pays decent. But let's be real, he's the one keeping us comfortable. We live in this nice house in the suburbs. No kids yet, but we were planning to start trying soon. Everyone always said we were the perfect couple, and honestly, I agreed with them. Pierce is successful, attractive, smart, funny when he wants to be, and he treated me really well, or at least I thought he did. Here's the thing though, Pierce has always been a little too interested in where I am and what I'm doing. Like, he expects me to text him throughout the day about my schedule, but if I ask him the same questions, he gets all weird about it, like I'm being clingy. And don't even get me started on how he acts around money. He makes more, so obviously he should pay for more stuff, but then he gets all particular about what I spend my own money on. It's like he wants control but doesn't want to admit it. We never really talked about our dating history in detail, which I thought was mature. I mean, why dwell on the past, right? He knew I had boyfriends before him, and I knew he dated other people, but we kept it general. Honestly, I preferred it that way because some things are just better left alone. It's not like I was hiding anything major. I just didn't see the point in giving him a play-by-play of every guy I ever kissed. Pierce can be really sensitive too, which gets annoying sometimes. Like, if I make a joke about how he works late all the time, he acts like I'm attacking his career. Or if I mention that my friend's husband surprised her with something nice, Pierce gets all defensive. Like I'm criticizing him. It's exhausting having to watch everything I say because he might take it the wrong way. The other thing is, he's always been kind of judgmental about people. Not in an obvious way, but he'll make these little comments about how people should conduct themselves or what's appropriate behavior. Sometimes I wonder if he thinks he's better than everyone else because he has this important job and makes good money. Like when we're out with friends and someone tells a wild story from their past. He gets this look on his face like he's judging them. Don't get me wrong, Pierce can be sweet when he wants to be. He remembers anniversaries and brings me flowers sometimes, and he's good about helping around the house when I ask him to. But lately, it feels like I have to ask for everything. He used to just notice when I needed something or when I was having a bad day, but now it's like he's distracted all the time. I've always been the one who puts more effort into our social life and planning things. Pierce just shows up and expects everything to be handled. Like when we got invited to his colleague's wedding a few weeks ago, I had to figure out what to wear, buy a gift, make sure we had directions, all of it. He just complained about having to give up his Saturday. The wedding was at this country club place, and it was actually really nice, even though the bride's dress was kind of outdated if you ask me. Not that I said anything, because I'm not that type of person. Pierce was in one of his moods, though, acting tired and antisocial. I kept trying to get him to mingle with people, but he just wanted to sit there and barely talk to anyone. It was embarrassing, honestly, because people probably thought something was wrong with us. After dinner, they started showing this slideshow of old photos and videos of the bride and groom. It was cute, I guess. Typical wedding stuff. Then, some of their college friends took over and started showing videos from their phones of old parties and trips. Everyone was laughing and having a good time, remembering the good old days. I was actually enjoying myself for once that night because Pierce had finally relaxed a little and was actually participating in conversations. Then it happened. One of the videos was from this party I went to junior year of college. I recognized it immediately, but there was nothing I could do. There I was, on someone's phone screen, clearly drunk, making out with these two guys from my dorm. It was just stupid college stuff that everyone did back then, but seeing it projected in front of all these people, including my husband, was mortifying. My friends realized what was happening and quickly skipped to the next video, but it was too late. Everyone had seen it. I wanted to disappear into the floor, not because I was ashamed of what I did. It was college. Everyone experimented, but because of how awkward it made things. Pierce didn't say anything at the time, but I could tell he was processing what he'd just seen. The rest of the night felt weird and tense, even though I tried to act normal and laugh it off. On the drive home, Pierce was quiet, which wasn't unusual, but this felt different. When I tried to make conversation about the wedding, he just gave short answers. I knew he was thinking about the video, but I figured he just needed time to get over the initial shock of seeing his wife in a compromising position. I mean, it's not like I cheated on him or anything. This was years before we even met. When we got home, I could tell Pierce wanted to talk about it, but honestly, I was hoping we could just pretend it never happened. I was already embarrassed enough without having to relive it. But of course, he couldn't let it go. He waited until we were getting ready for bed, and then brought it up, in that careful way he does when he's trying not to start a fight, but clearly wants to discuss something. He asked me about the video, and I tried to brush it off. I told him it was just stupid college stuff, and that I was sorry he had to see it like that in front of everyone. I thought that would be the end of it, but Pierce kept pushing. He wanted to know more details about that night, and about my college years in general. I could tell he was upset but trying to hide it, which made me defensive. I don't understand why he couldn't just accept that everyone has a past and move on. It's not like he was a monk before we met, but no, he had to keep asking questions like, when did this happen? Who were those guys? And was this normal behavior for me back then? It felt like an interrogation, and I didn't appreciate being made to feel like I had done something wrong. So I told him some things, but not everything. Because honestly, what's the point? Yes, I had fun in college. Yes, I hooked up with people. Yes, sometimes I drank too much and did things I wouldn't do now, but so did everyone else. And I didn't see why I needed to give him a detailed account of every mistake I made when I was 20 years old. Pierce kept pushing, though, and I could see he wasn't going to drop it. So I told him about some of my relationships and hookups, but I definitely downplayed things. I mean, why hurt his feelings for no reason? I told him I had maybe 8 or 9 partners total, when the real number was probably closer to 15 or 16. And I didn't mention the really casual stuff or the times when things got a little wild, because what he doesn't know won't hurt him. But even with the edited version, Pierce was getting more and more upset. He started asking questions about whether I was ever in contact with any of these people and whether he'd ever met any of them. I told him no, which was mostly true. I mean, I might have a few guys on social media still, but it's not like we talk or anything. Then he started asking about the specific incident in the video, and I really didn't want to get into that. I told him I barely remembered that night because I was so drunk, which again was mostly true. I remembered some things, but not everything, and definitely not enough to give him the play-by-play he seemed to want. That look on his face that he gets when he's judging someone, and I started getting really frustrated. Here I was, being as honest as I could be about my past, and he was making me feel like some kind of terrible person for having lived a little before I met him. I started crying because the whole thing was so unfair, and he was making me feel awful about myself. I tried to explain that this was who I was before we met, and it had nothing to do with our relationship or how I felt about him. I told him that everyone experiments in college and that it didn't mean anything. I even pointed out that he wasn't exactly inexperienced when we met, so why was he holding me to a different standard? But Pierce just kept getting quieter and more distant. I could tell he was pulling away from me, and it was making me panic. Here I was, trying to be understanding about his feelings, and he was acting like I had personally betrayed him. I started getting angry, because this whole thing was so ridiculous. We're talking about things that happened years before we even knew each other existed. I told him that if he couldn't handle the fact that his wife had a life before him, then maybe we had bigger problems than I thought. I said he was being judgmental and unfair, and that I didn't deserve to be punished for things I did when I was practically a kid. I pointed out all the times he'd been less than perfect in our relationship and asked him how he'd feel if I held every mistake against him forever. The conversation went on for hours and just kept getting worse. Pierce barely said anything, which made me feel like I was talking to a wall. I tried everything, crying, explaining, getting angry, trying to make him see reason, but nothing worked. He just sat there with this cold expression, like he was already gone. By the time we went to bed, we were barely speaking, and I knew things were really bad. The next few days were horrible. Pierce was completely different, cold, distant, barely talking to me. He'd come home from work and go straight to his office or find something to do that didn't involve me. When I tried to bring up what we'd talked about, he'd just say he needed time to think. Time to think about what? It's not like I'd confess to having an affair. I started checking his phone and computer because his behavior was so weird. I needed to know if he was talking to someone else about our problems or getting advice from people who didn't understand the situation. I found some searches about relationship trust and marriage counseling, which honestly made me even more upset. Why was he researching this stuff instead of just talking to me? I tried to act normal, but it was impossible when he was treating me like a stranger. I'd make his favorite dinner, and he'd barely acknowledge it. I'd try to start conversations about our day, and he'd give me one-word answers. It was like living with a robot instead of my husband. So I started reaching out to friends and family because I needed support. I told my sister and a few close friends about what happened and how Pierce was overreacting to something that happened years ago. They all agreed that he was being unreasonable and that lots of people had wild college years. It felt good to have people on my side who could see how ridiculous this whole situation was. But Pierce found out I was talking to people about our private business, and that made him even more angry. He accused me of violating his privacy and said I was trying to turn people against him. I told him that I needed support, and that if he would actually talk to me, instead of shutting me out, then maybe I wouldn't need to get advice from other people. I also started posting more couple photos on social media because I wanted people to see that we were still together and happy. I mean, we weren't happy, but I wasn't about to let everyone know we were having problems. Pierce noticed and made some comment about how fake it was, which really hurt my feelings. I was trying to show that I still believed in our marriage, and he was criticizing me for it. The worst part was how he started acting around money. He'd always been weird about expenses, but now he was questioning everything I bought. I got my nails done like I always do, and he asked if it was really necessary right now. I bought a new dress for a work event, and he wanted to see the receipt. It was like he was punishing me financially because he was mad about my past. I tried to get him to go to counseling with me, but he said he wasn't ready for that yet. Not ready for what? To work on our marriage? I offered to do whatever he wanted, answer any questions, cut contact with anyone from my past, anything to make this right. But he just kept saying he needed more time. Then he started working late more often and going to bed at different times than me. I could tell he was avoiding being alone with me, which was devastating. This was my husband, the person who was supposed to love me unconditionally, and he was treating me like I had some kind of disease. I got so frustrated that I started bringing up his past mistakes, too. Remember when he forgot our anniversary last year? Or when he went out with his friends instead of coming to my work party? Or all the times he'd been too tired or busy to really listen when I needed to talk about something important? I wasn't trying to be mean, but I wanted him to understand that everyone has things they're not proud of. But Pierce just shut down even more. He said I was deflecting and that his mistakes had nothing to do with what we were dealing with now. I told him that was exactly my point. Why should my past mistakes matter more than his current ones? At least my stuff happened before we were together. Things kept getting worse, and I started to panic that he might actually leave me. I mean, this was Pierce, my successful doctor husband who I'd built my whole life around. I couldn't imagine starting over at 29, especially not over something this stupid. So, I tried harder to fix things. I cooked more, I was extra affectionate when he'd let me be, I suggested fun things we could do together, but nothing worked. If anything, he seemed more determined to stay distant from me. 3 weeks after the wedding incident, I came home from work and found Pierce sitting at the kitchen table with a manila envelope in front of him. My stomach dropped because I knew immediately what it was. Even before he said anything, he told me he'd filed for divorce, just like that. No more discussion, no counseling, no trying to work things out. He said he couldn't get past what I'd told him, and that he realized I wasn't the person he thought I was when he married me. Can you believe that? After 8 years together, he was throwing it all away because of some old videos and college stories. I completely lost it. I started crying and begging him to reconsider. I told him we could work through this, that lots of couples had bigger problems than this, and figured it out. I offered to go to counseling by myself, to cut off anyone from my past. He wanted me to do whatever it took to save our marriage. But he just sat there like a statue and said his mind was made up. I couldn't understand how he could be so cold and final about something that had nothing to do with him or our relationship. I kept asking him why this mattered so much when I'd been a faithful wife for 5 years. Why did things that happened before we even met matter more than everything we'd built together? Pierce said it wasn't just about what happened in college. He said it was about how I'd handled the whole situation, how I'd been dishonest about my past, and how different I was from what he'd thought. Dishonest? I told him what he needed to know. I wasn't trying to deceive him. I was trying to protect both of us from unnecessary trauma. I pointed out that he'd never asked for details about my past before, so how was I supposed to know he wanted a full confession? And even if I had told him everything up front, would he have still married me? Probably not, which just proves he's judgmental and hypocritical. I tried to make him see that he was destroying our entire future over something that meant nothing. Those guys from college meant nothing to me. That whole period of my life was just me figuring out who I was before I became the woman he fell in love with. But he couldn't see past his own hurt feelings to understand that. The worst part was how calm and decided he was about everything. Like he'd already processed this and moved on while I was still trying to figure out what was happening. He had obviously been planning this for weeks, while pretending to consider working things out. That felt like the real betrayal to me. I started getting angry because this whole thing was so unfair. Hiro was fighting for our marriage while he was just getting up. I told him he was weak for not being willing to fight for what we had. I said he was letting his ego and his insecurities destroy something good just because he couldn't handle the fact that his wife had lived a little before meeting him. But Pierce wouldn't engage with me. He just kept saying that he'd made his decision and it was best for both of us to move forward separately. Best for both of us? How is destroying my life best for me? I'd given him the best years of my life, and this was how he was repaying me. I begged him to at least try counseling before giving up completely, but he said he wasn't interested. He said he'd already talked to a lawyer and that he wanted the divorce too. It was as simple and quick as our 8 years together was, just some inconvenience he wanted to get through. That night, I called everyone I could think of, my parents, my sister, my closest friends, trying to get someone to help me talk sense into him. Most people were shocked and agreed that he was overreacting. My mom said men could be prideful about these things, but that he'd probably come around once he realized what he was giving up. But a few people, including my dad, said they could understand why Pierce was upset. That made me so angry because they didn't understand the whole situation. They were judging me based on one stupid video and some college stories, without considering everything else about who I am and what kind of wife I'd been. I started texting and calling Pierce constantly, trying to get him to change his mind. I sent long messages explaining how sorry I was and how much I loved him. I tried to remind him of all our good times together and everything we'd planned for our future. But he barely responded, and when he did, it was just to ask me to give him space. Space? We were married. You don't get space from your wife when she's trying to save your marriage. But Pierce had already checked out emotionally and was just going through the motions until he could officially be done with me. I started showing up at his work, trying to talk to him, but that just made him angrier. He said I was embarrassing him in front of his colleagues and that if I didn't stop, he'd get a restraining order. A restraining order against his own wife for trying to save their marriage? That's when I realized he was completely serious about this divorce and wasn't going to change his mind. The legal process was horrible. Pierce had already talked to a lawyer and had everything planned out. Since we didn't have kids and had been married less than 10 years, he thought it would be straightforward. But I wasn't about to just roll over and let him take everything we'd built together. I got my own lawyer, and we started fighting over assets. Pierce made more money, but I contributed to our life together in other ways. I'd managed our household, planned our social events, and supported his career by being the perfect doctor's wife. That had to be worth something. The house was the biggest issue since it was in both our names, but Pierce had put down most of the down payment with money he'd saved before we got married. My lawyer said I was still entitled to half the equity we'd built during the marriage, but Pierce's lawyer disagreed. I also wanted spousal support since I'd adjusted my career choices around his schedule and location. I could have made different decisions if I'd known he was going to abandon me over something so trivial, but Pierce thought that too, saying I was perfectly capable of supporting myself. Meanwhile, Pierce seemed to be doing just fine. He'd moved into some temporary, furnished place and was acting like this was all just a minor inconvenience. I heard through mutual friends that he seemed happy and relieved, which was devastating. How could he be relieved about destroying our marriage? I kept hoping he'd realize what a mistake he was making and come back to fight for us. Every time my phone rang, I hoped it was him saying he wanted to work things out, but weeks went by, and he never wavered. He was completely done with me and our life together. The worst part was how our friends started taking sides. Some people understood that Pierce was being unreasonable and supported me, but others seemed to think I'd brought this on myself somehow. A few couples stopped inviting me to things, which was incredibly hurtful. These were supposed to be my friends, but they were judging me just like Pierce was. I started hearing rumors that Pierce was already dating someone new, which felt like a knife in my heart. How could he move on so quickly after 8 years together? It proved that he'd never really loved me the way I thought he did. If he could replace me that easily, then our whole relationship had been a lie. I tried to find out who this new woman was and discovered it was someone from his work. Some nurse or medical assistant, I'm not sure, younger than me, probably with no complicated past to worry about. It made me sick thinking about him with someone else, especially someone he worked with. No wonder he didn't want to fix our marriage. He already had a replacement lined up. I confronted him about it, but he said his personal life wasn't my business anymore. Not my business. I was still his wife, even if we were separated. But Pierce had completely moved on and was treating me like some stranger he used to know. 6 months later, the divorce was final, and my life was completely destroyed. I had to move into a small apartment because I couldn't afford the house payments on my own. Pierce got to keep most of our assets, since he'd contributed more financially during the marriage. The judge didn't see my contributions as equal to his monetary ones, which was completely unfair. I lost most of our mutual friends, who seemed more comfortable staying close to Pierce than dealing with the drama of our divorce. Some of them acted like I was toxic or something, just because I'd fought for what was rightfully mine during the legal proceedings. They didn't understand that I was just protecting myself from being completely screwed over. My family was supportive, but even they started suggesting that maybe it was time to move on and focus on rebuilding my life, move on from an 8-year relationship that ended over nothing. They didn't understand that you don't just get over something like that. The worst part was seeing Pierce thrive without me. I heard he got promoted at work and was doing really well. He and his new girlfriend seemed happy together, based on what I could see on social media before I blocked them. It was like he just erased me from his life and moved on like our marriage had never happened. Meanwhile, I was struggling with everything. My work performance suffered because I was so depressed and distracted. I couldn't afford to do the things I used to do or live the lifestyle I'd gotten used to with Pierce. I felt like I'd lost everything, while he'd lost nothing. I tried dating, but it was impossible to find anyone who compared to what I'd had with Pierce. Plus, I was almost 30 now, and most of the good guys were already taken. The men who were available either had major issues or weren't at Pierce's level professionally and financially. I'd gone from being married to a successful doctor to being a divorced woman starting over with nothing. People kept telling me I was young and that I'd find someone else, but they didn't understand Pierce wasn't just some boyfriend. He was my husband, my future, my whole life plan. I wasn't supposed to be starting over at this age. I was supposed to be starting a family and building a life with the man I married. What makes this whole thing even more infuriating is that Pierce acts like he's the victim in all this, like I somehow wronged him by having a past before we met. He threw away 8 years together over something that had nothing to do with him, and somehow I'm the bad guy for not just accepting it gracefully. I've had to listen to people say that maybe this was for the best, and that we weren't compatible anyway. That's easy for them to say since their lives weren't destroyed. They don't have to start over with nothing while watching their ex-husband live happily ever after with someone new. The truth is, Pierce was always judgmental and controlling. I just didn't see it clearly until this happened. A truly loving husband would have worked through this with me instead of just giving up at the first sign of something he didn't like. He was looking for an excuse to leave, and my past just gave him one. Now I'm stuck dealing with the consequences of his decision, while he gets to be the hero who stood up for his principles or whatever. Everyone feels sorry for him, like he's the one who got hurt, but I'm the one whose life got destroyed. I'm the one who lost everything. I'm the one who has to figure out how to rebuild at 29 years old. And for what? Because I lived a little in college? Because I didn't volunteer information about every hookup I ever had? Because I tried to protect his feelings by not giving him details that would just hurt him? I was being considerate, and he punished me for it. So yeah, that's my story. My perfect marriage destroyed over one stupid video and some ancient history that shouldn't have mattered to anyone. Pierce gets to ride off into the sunset with his new girlfriend, while I'm left picking up the pieces of the life he destroyed. But I'm supposed to be grateful that I found out his true character before we had kids together, right? What a blessing.